What is the biggest issue with the Minnesota Vikings over the past 2 seasons? You could say injuries. You could say coaching. Well, in my opinion, it is no doubt the rushing attack for Minnesota. You guys see the stats on the bottom of your screen right now. In 2022, the Vikings averaged 97.7 rushing yards per game. That was 27th. Did it get better this past season? No. In 2023, they averaged 91.4 yards per game on the ground. That was 29th in the National Football League. The biggest issue with this Vikings team is they have had an inability to consistently run the football under Kevin O'Connell. Coming up on today's show, we got 6 names that could fix that. But let's look back last season at the 2023 rushing leaders for Minnesota. And the biggest standout right here that you guys see is the touchdowns on the bottom of the screen. The Vikings were last in the NFL in touchdowns this past season from running backs. Alexander Mattison had 180 carries, 0 touchdowns. Ty Chandler over 100 as well, only 3. And Cam Akers, before he tore his Achilles, thought he ran well, but he only had 1 touchdown for 138 yards. I know you might be saying, Patrick, you're a big fan of Ty Chandler. You love that guy. You were telling us about him since the beginning of last season. And yes, I am. I love Ty Chandler, but I still have questions about him being a true workhorse and a true running back 1 in the National Football League. Could he be a great change of pace back, a great running back 2? No doubt. I would love him in that role. But I think the Vikings may need to think bigger and make a splash potentially in free agency. And if you guys want the Vikings to do that, why don't you show me? Drop me a like on today's video. Show your support. Show Kwesi Adofo-Mensah that you want the Vikings to make a splash at RB. And hey, without further ado, guys, we're going to dive into 6 running backs that the Vikings could sign or bring in right now. What's going on, guys? My name is Patrick Siepman. Coming up on today's show, 6 running backs the Vikings can bring in to fix their running game, because obviously, like I just said, that's the biggest issue with Minnesota. And number 1 on my list is the running back from the New York Giants, Saquon Barkley. Right now, he is currently 27 years old, and the Giants can still franchise tag him. But let's just assume they don't, and he hits free agency. He's my top choice for Minnesota. I know you might be saying, you look at these stats, they're not really that, visually appealing, like 3.9 yards per carry, 4.4, 3.7, 1.8. But guys, I watched a lot of Giants football this past season. He still has juice. Like, he still has a lot left in the tank. And honestly, if I had to say, him averaging 3.9 yards per carry, I thought it was good behind that offensive line, frankly, this past season. He still has that juice. He still has that wiggle. And I would absolutely love if the Vikings could somehow sign him. It's going to come down to price and obviously guaranteed money and years on that deal. But if the Vikings could somehow bring him in, sign me up any day of the week. But another big name running back out there right now is the king himself, King Derrick Henry. And at age 30 right now, Derrick Henry is still one of the more productive running backs in the National Football League. I mean, his career numbers are just frankly ridiculous. I mean, 2,000 carries over his career in 119 games. Over 9,500 rushing yards for Derrick Henry. And he's not known as, the biggest, dual threat back in the league. But, hey, going for 1,500 yards in there as well is pretty special. But if I had to choose one, if I had to go either Derrick Henry or Saquon Barkley, as it stands right now, I think Saquon Barkley is the better overall running back. There is no doubt about that. But I want a kind of downhill power running back in Minnesota, and that guy's Derrick Henry. I showed you the stats at the beginning of this show today. Vikings had 4 touchdowns from their main group of running backs for the entire season. I guarantee you bring in Derrick Henry, that will change immediately. So personally, I had to pick one. Saquon, Derrick Henry, give me King Henry, and that mix and match of King Henry and Ty Chandler, I think that would really fire me up. But if you guys had to pick one, let me know. Type 2-6 for Saquon, or give me a double deuce for the King Henry himself. Let me know what running back you would want in Minnesota next season. Now, another guy that was linked to the Vikings actually last offseason as a potential name that they could bring in is the dual threat back, Austin Ekeler. He is 28 years old right now, and that's the number one thing with Ekeler is he is the definition of a dual threat back. He's great in the run game as well, as you guys see with the stats on screen. Definitely took that step back this past season, though. Even the eye test with Ekeler, he just looked slower. Like, he didn't have that same burst that he had in years past. Like, that's why I just, overall, if I had to choose, a bigger name running back, whether it's Saquon, Derrick Henry, or Austin Ekeler, or even we'll get to Josh Jacobs here in a second, if I had to kind of cross one out, no doubt, I'm out on Ekeler. There's no chance I would bring him in, even if he wants to sign a 1-year, vet min type of deal. Like, I'm just out on him because he gives me the same vibes that Dalvin Cook had, where I think we've seen with these running backs in the modern day game, like, they are really, really good. They're really, really special. And then they just lose that extra burst. They lose that extra juice, and then they fall off a map. That's what I'm seeing with Eckler this past season. So even if it's for the smallest contract possible you could sign him for in the NFL, I'm out on Eckler. I would go a different direction. Now, a guy that definitely does intrigue me right here, the Dallas Cowboys running back, also known as an absolute Viking killer. Vikings fans, you're probably pretty familiar with him. Tony Pollard at 26 years old. He was tagged by the Cowboys this past season, and he kind of worked his way into a more workhorse load this past season. Obviously, Zeke not being there, he upped his carries a ton, but I think the stats at the top of your screen right now, the top two, 2022 and 2023. You guys see both, 2 yards off, 2 yards difference between the two seasons, but he's got almost 60 or 59 more carries in 2023 with the same amount of yards. So I think that is more chopped up to him getting a lot more carries and just overall him more of a workload that I think brought his yards per game down. But I think if you had to go him as a 1-2 punch with Ty Chandler, I'd be absolutely all in on that. But, listen, the thing is with Tony Pollard also, I think he does add a huge addition out of the pass-catching game as well, which we don't really, there's not really a Vikings running back on the roster that does that. So Pollard could definitely be, that guy. But I do want to tell you guys first about today's sponsor on today's edition of Vikings Now, and that is Game Time. If you guys download the Game Time app and use the promo code VikingsChat, VIKINGSCHAT, you guys will get $20 off your first purchase. What is Game Time? It's the best seats, lowest price guaranteed, and the prices drop as the events get closer. Whether you want to go see a Wild game, you guys want to go see a concert, you guys want to go see the Timberwolves play and Anthony Edwards and the crew, make sure you guys do download Game Time. Whenever you are getting a ticket, download Game Time, use code VikingsChat. We'll give you guys $20 off. $20 off. Link for that in the comment section and description of today's show. So the last free agent running back signing we're going to talk about, and then I got a guy in the draft that I really, really like. But the last one on here is Josh Jacobs. And if we're talking about running backs falling off, Josh Jacobs might be the prime candidate here. Listen, like his 2022 season was absolutely special. Like there's no doubt about it. Like Josh Jacobs was insane. Like he ran for over 1,600 yards, almost 5 yards per carry, 12 touchdowns. He was great. But this past season with Las Vegas, he's definitely taken that step back, man. And he's just not the same guy that he was, in the past. And it's kind of the same camp as Austin Eckler and how we felt about Dalvin Cook, where it's just like, I would rather get some young and fresh legs in the building rather than paying a guy, obviously you want to give him big time money, but giving him a decent payout here when he could just go draft a guy in the third round and actually have a guy in the third round that we could draft here in a second. But I want to get you guys active down in the comment section. Name a running back you want Minnesota to sign. If you want to go big and go King Henry, Saquon, that's fine. Or if you guys want to go a little more cost-efficient option, let me know your thoughts down below. But name a running back you guys want the Vikings to sign. So an option out of the draft, and this is a guy I've absolutely fell in love with just watching his highlights on Twitter. And, I think when running backs, I kind of, it bothers me when, people will say, oh, they're scouting him in the draft and everything, and, they're just watching his highlights. But I do feel like the running back position, that is the one group that, watching highlights, using your eye test, I think that checks the box here. But Raekwon Davis or Ray Davis out of Kentucky, this dude's an absolute dog. Coming in at 5'10", 216 pounds. He's currently PFF's 100th ranked prospect in the 2024 NFL draft. And this dude was a menace in 2023. He can get it done out of the pass catching game as well, but on 199 carries for over 1,100 yards, he was averaging 5.7 yards per carry, 21 total touchdowns, 33 receptions, 323 yards, and 0 fumbles. He's got a great combination of power, speed, and all that. He is truly, truly one of those guys that just pops off the screen any single time I watch him. If you could get this guy, 3rd, 4th round, this guy and Ty Chandler, and then obviously Madison will probably be there as well, I would feel very, very confident in the Vikings running back room moving forward. But my take on the whole thing, my overall kind of conclusion on the Vikings running back room, if you can't land Saquon Barkley or Derrick Henry for also a reasonable deal, I'm probably out on signing a guy in free agency. Take your chances on a guy in the draft. Get some fresh and young legs in the building because we've seen it. Even Kyren Williams for the Rams last season. that dude's an absolute dog. And the Rams got him later on in the draft. Like, you can find these guys. I think also overall, in terms of rushing offense, I honestly really do believe it's 85% on the offensive line. And then the extra 15, kind of those extra yards, are on the running back. But that would be my take. That's how I would play the running back position for Minnesota. But let me know. Prediction time here on the channel. Who will lead the Vikings in rushing next season? Who will be, whether you think it's Ty Chandler, guy out of the draft, or maybe you're going bold and saying Derrick Henry or Saquon Barkley. Let me know your thoughts down below. And guys, I am going to be tweeting about the Vikings a lot more here on the offseason. Don't really get on Twitter too much, but I'm going to try to up my Twitter game. So the handle is @PatSieps. Link for that in the comment section and description. If you guys just want more Twitter or Vikings content on your timeline, give me a follow on Twitter. As always, Skol Vikes.